Good day and welcome to this ABSA Insight Series. I am Fifi Peters. In today's session, we put the spotlight on energy. With the United Nations Climate Change Conference happening soon in Glasgow, Africa needs to ask itself where it fits into the global resource mix. Shirley Webber, the coverage head for resources and energy at Absa Corporate and Investment Banking, joins me now to discuss this in more detail. Shirley, good to see you as always. Let's just talk about Africa's position then, in terms of its position in the global resources mix. How would you describe it?
Thank you, Fifi. I think as a continent, we are very rich in natural gas, in energy, minerals and metals, definitely those utilized in battery storage technologies, electric vehicles, fuel cells, power generation alternatives, etc. And copper, lithium, cobalt, and graphite are definitely minerals and metals on the continent that will stand us in good stead, for economic growth and focusing on energy as well. I believe that more and more governments, where those commodities in their countries where those commodities are situated, will really drive greener energy technology. So, for both the energy, minerals and metals, as well as natural gas, Africa fits in completely with a greener energy model going forward.
And then we have this situation where the population on the continent is growing, and it's growing fast. By 2040, I believe we are set to even outstrip China and India in terms of the number of people on the continent. What then does that mean for the resource sector?
There will definitely be an increase clearly in energy demand going forward. But I believe for everyone, stakeholders, governments, financial institutions, it's actually a very big opportunity for us to drive sustainability and to ensure as well with the growth in population that we actually strive for responsible growth in the extraction of these metals and minerals. Clearly, it all relies on, the government focuses, their political stability, etc., in order for us to get investments going, for the greener energy. And we'll be part of that bigger demand going forward.
We have seen a decline in foreign direct investment in the resource sectors when you are compared to what is happening in other spheres of the economy. Just broadly speaking, what is behind this decline, and is there anything that our governments can do to arrest it at this stage?
I do believe the investment in our African countries are definitely in the hands of the stability of the economies as well. I think political stability, clarity on monetary and fiscal policies, all of that will assist in driving, more and more investments coming onto stream. What we've definitely picked up, in these African economies that we are actually part of, is that these, specific infrastructure, water and transport, there's a lot of activity, into those type of investments as well. All of that can help the investments in, the greener energy and minerals, and not to take away the natural gas development as well.
I just wonder, as we talk about a post-COVID-19 world, how do we ensure that Africa gets a lot more value in these resources and the greener space that we're speaking about? I mean, what needs to happen for a more inclusive growth in our resources sector to take place, such that you even have a lot more community involvement taking place?
It's a very good question, Fifi. I think from our side, we've definitely seen the evidence that the involvement of communities, inclusive growth is going to be very important for the economies to grow. And that includes, the value chain, unlocking the value chain. And definitely one part of, for example, the collaboration responsibility is there within, governments, within financial institutions, within the actual companies that's there. But working together to support these are going to be crucial. We've seen many African countries putting down local content, rules and regulations, and beneficiation should be part of the economy. How can we give unemployment a big drive to move to employment if we do not beneficiate within the various borders of the countries? It's vital.
Circling back to sustainability, because we have seen it play out as a dominant theme, particularly in the mining space, as we all try to ramp up our efforts towards net zero by 2050, as it were. Speak to us about how the bank, how ABSA is viewing this theme in terms of the decision it's making around financing, because we have seen lenders elsewhere announce really bold plans to cut ties from metals and practices that are not as sustainable?
I think from our side, we've tried to be very responsible in the way that we look at financing. We are on the African continent, where many of our economies are reliant still, on fossil fuel energy. And we know that every African country, including South Africa, has got a big drive out, to put more renewables and greener energy alternatives out there. As we see the economies change and as the energy transition obviously moves forward, we'll definitely move forward with those as well. We actually encourage the greener technologies, etc. We are completely in favor of renewables. Hydrogen is obviously a big, focus as well in many of the countries where there's natural gas. And we have an abundance of natural gas on the continent. So the way that we look at financing, we want to be responsible. We cannot exclude the growth in these various economies, but also trying to help and assist those economies to move to greener alternatives. But that is definitely a medium to long-term plan. And I think it's an exciting path, and COVID clearly accelerated that energy transition.
But Shirley, just talk to us about some of the other major themes that are likely to play out and to shape the global resources sector.
If I look from an African continent point of view, I still believe that Africa is definitely well poised for assisting in the energy demand, especially from a natural gas point of view. Clearly, I've mentioned, the greener energy minerals and metals, of which we also have an abundance of, the copper, the lithiums, the cobalts. What I see with the population growth that we've spoken about earlier as well, the access to motor vehicles, we think that's going to increase because we compared to the rest of the world, the access to motor vehicles are much smaller. So we see that as well. I think we will see a lot of development of things like rare earths, the lithium deposits, etc. happening. And one thing is very certain, capital will follow sustainability. And if there's no evidence of all of us working towards a carbon neutral, carbon zero type of effect, equity investments will not necessarily happen in those specific areas. I think many of the African countries have got reserves sitting there just waiting to be developed so that they can participate, in this transition that we're all being part of now.
Where you think the low-hanging fruits are, in your view, for companies and even governments to ramp up on their sustainable offerings?
I do think, with the African continent and the countries so rich in those resources that we've mentioned, I think is to make sure that the investment regime is positive, that there's not decisions being made from one election to another that can just overturn, very practical and very objective decisions that were made in the past. And once again, make an investment community out there and make sure that the community can actually also benefit from from all of these investments, because that's how an economy grows. It must be inclusive growth, otherwise it won't happen.
What are the risks? I mean, we have seen a bit of losing steam, as it were, in the Chinese economy, which is a major consumer of a lot of the stuff that we produce. So what are you worried about in terms of the outlook for our global resources sector within the African context?
Because of the demand for the various commodities that we are sitting with, and copper is a good example, and clearly you've seen the price obviously spiking, and reaching all-time highs, including, even palladium and platinum and gold, at certain points during the pandemic. We just need to make sure that companies risk manage, for example, those positions, because in other words, to protect their bottom line. And that for me is a risk that, the companies can do a few things to protect their bottom line. That clearly helps the financial institutions when we give out project funding for those developments. And definitely a risk on a government side, and I'm talking about any government, is to make sure that things like royalty taxes and, those capex type of benefits that they can give through, that is well managed. Because it's very important to plan for those as well when there's good times. We've seen what happened in the oil and gas space, where it went minus $40 a barrel of oil, and people actually got paid to take up the oil instead of selling it. So I do think we've learned a few lessons during the last 2 years, and take those learnings and use it.
Mm-hmm. Make hay while the sun shines, but do plan for a rainy day. I think that would be the perfect mix in terms of balance. But Shirley, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time, ma'am. Always a pleasure. Shirley Webber, coverage head for resources and energy at Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. That brings us to the end of this Absa Insight series. Thanks so much for watching. We'll do it again next time. Goodbye.